The scent of my new life was a complex perfume of pine resin, the rich, loamy smell of damp earth, and a faint, clean minerality that drifted off the water. After 2 decades marinated in the sterile, recycled air of Chicago boardrooms and the acrid tang of urban exhaust, the air in Heron's Landing was a tonic for the soul. My house, a modest but solid structure of cedar and stone, was nestled into a slope that cascaded gently toward the shimmering expanse of Whisper Lake. This was the piece I had purchased, the closing price paid with 20 years of my life, a life spent in the brutalist theater of high-stakes corporate real estate. I was Alex Pierce, former Executive VP of Acquisitions for Ethelred Development, and I was done. My ambitions had been downsized to teaching my golden retriever, Buddy, to fetch a floating toy, and, perhaps, finally, learning the difference between a pin oak and a red oak. The moving truck, a titan of the road, groaned in diesel protest as it navigated the final, tight curve of my long driveway. From the porch, a mug of rapidly cooling coffee in my hand, I watched the driver, a man with forearms like thick bundles of rope, miss my newly planted gardenias by a breathtakingly slim margin. I gave him a thumbs up. The early sun was a painter, burning mist off the lake's surface with broad strokes of gold and azure. It was a masterpiece of tranquility. That masterpiece lasted exactly 7 more minutes. A golf cart, bone white and moving with the silent, predatory grace of a shark, purred to a halt at the edge of my property, precisely where my private asphalt met the HOA-mandated cobblestone-stamped street. At its helm sat a woman who appeared to be sculpted from solidified disapproval. She was in her late 50s, with a helmet of blonde hair so rigidly lacquered it seemed capable of deflecting insects, small birds, and perhaps even harsh language. Her outfit was a symphony in beige, a color that wasn't so much a choice as a statement of neutrality so aggressive it became hostile. In her lap, she cradled the modern scepter of the petty tyrant, a clipboard. She did not dismount. She simply sat, engine off, observing the movers with the focused intensity of an artillery spotter. I sighed. The warm ceramic of the mug, a small comfort. The welcome wagon, I supposed, had arrived in its most austere form. I ambled down the long drive, consciously relaxing my shoulders, manufacturing a smile that felt foreign on my face. Buddy trotted alongside me before a fascinating scent near a hydrangea bush claimed his full attention. "Good morning," I offered, pitching my voice to a friendly, non-threatening frequency. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" Her eyes, the pale, unforgiving blue of a winter sky, flicked from the truck to me. There was no warmth, only a swift, dismissive appraisal. "It was," she said, her tone implying my very presence had introduced a pollutant into the atmosphere. "Are you the new owner of Lot 47? "I am, Alex Pierce. It's a pleasure to meet you." I extended a hand, a gesture of ingrained habit. She ignored it, her gaze dropping to the clipboard, as if consulting a sacred text. "Brenda Van Zandt. I am the president of the Heron's Landing Homeowners Association." She enunciated president with the gravitas of a monarch announcing their title. "Mr. Pierce, your moving vehicle is in gross violation of Bylaw 14 Section B, Paragraph 3. I blinked. "I'm sorry." Commercial vehicles exceeding 2.5 tons are strictly prohibited from parking on community thoroughfares between 9 m and 5 m on weekdays, she recited, her voice a monotone drone of memorized power. This is to preserve the aesthetic tranquility and prevent undue stress on the pavement. I glanced at the colossal truck, then back at her. The sheer, unadulterated absurdity of it was stunning. Ms. Van Zant, it's a moving truck. It's rather essential for the act of moving. They should be finished in a few hours. The bylaws, Mr. Pierce, do not contain codicils for moving, she said, the word dripping with disdain. This is your official verbal warning. If that vehicle is not removed within 60 minutes, a fine of $100 will be levied against your property. A subsequent $50 fine will be assessed for each additional 30-minute interval. My smile was now a rigid death mask. This had to be a joke, a bizarre form of neighborhood hazing. They're in the middle of unloading my entire life. There's a grand piano in there. I can't ask them to park it a mile away and shuttle everything in by hand. A failure of your logistical planning is not a sufficient cause to grant a variance, she stated, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on her clipboard. Her gaze drifted past me, her lip curling as she saw the empty boxes beginning to accumulate near my garage. I also trust you've ordered the approved, taupe-colored, wildlife-resistant refuse and recycling containers through the HOA portal. Use of non-sanctioned containers is a separate and immediate fine. And ensure those boxes are broken down and stored out of sight by nightfall. That's Bylaw 28, Section F. For a moment, I was speechless. I had stared down union bosses who could chew through steel rebar. I had negotiated billion-dollar air rights deals over 72-hour stretches fueled by nothing but cold coffee and sheer spite. Yet, this woman, in her beige armor and silent chariot, had managed to completely wrong-foot me with the sheer audacity of her pettiness. Before I could formulate a response, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A call from Marcus Thorne, my old chief counsel. "Excuse me for one moment," I said to Brenda, turning my back to her, a deliberate, if small, assertion of control. "Alex," Marcus's voice boomed. "Just confirming the wire for the annual property taxes on the Whisper Lake Holdings LLC went through. It's a hefty bill for a parcel of undeveloped land and water. My friend, you sure you don't want to sell it back to the HOA? They've been sending feelers for years." "Positive, Marcus," I said, my voice low, watching the sunlight dance on the lake's surface. My lake. The whole point of buying the adjacent house was to finally enjoy the asset. Consider the taxes a subscription fee for Serenity. "Your version of Serenity, maybe," he chuckled. "All right, just checking. Let me know if you need anything." I hung up and turned back to Brenda, a new resolve hardening within me. The brief exchange had been a vital reminder of the true landscape of power here. She was fighting over a few feet of cobblestone. I owned the entire horizon. "Understood, Ms. Van Zant," I said, my voice now calm and measured. "I will speak to the movers. I'm sure we can expedite the process." "See that you do," she sniffed, her eyes narrowing, perhaps sensing the subtle shift in my demeanor. "I will return in 1 hour to ensure compliance." Without another word, she engaged the golf cart's electric motor. It whirred away with a faint, triumphant hum, leaving me in its wake. I looked from her retreating chariot to the pristine, unnervingly uniform houses lining the street. I had come here for peace. But as I glanced toward the vast, silent lake, I had the sinking feeling that peace was not something I would be given. It was something I would have to conquer. And the cold, dormant strategist inside me, the part I had tried so hard to retire, whispered a single, familiar word: game on. The first official notice arrived a week later, not merely mailed, but delivered by certified letter. It was a deliberate, theatrical gesture, a legalistic flourish designed to intimidate. The envelope was thick, cream-colored cardstock, the HOA logo embossed in gold. It felt less like a neighborly reminder and more like a declaration of war. Inside, printed in a severe Times New Roman font, was a list of my supposed transgressions. Official notice of bylaw, infraction and fine assessment, property lot, 47, 12, Whisper Lake Drive, owner Alex Pierce. Infraction 1, violation of bylaw. 22, Section C, lawn and garden ornamentation. Description, the placement of one unapproved statuary item, a garden gnome in the front-facing flower bed. All lawn ornaments require pre-approval by the Architectural Review Committee, ARC. Fine, $50 infraction. 2, violation of bylaw. 28, Section G, refuse container management. Description, on Wednesday, September 10th, the approved recycling container for Lot 47 remained at the curb until 2:17 p.m. Per regulations, all containers must be removed from public view no later than 12:00 p.m. on the day of pickup. Fine, $75. I stared at the paper, a slow, cold anger beginning to uncoil in my chest. The gnome was a housewarming gift from my 7-year-old niece, a cheerful ceramic fellow with a pointy red hat. I'd placed him peeking out from behind a hosta plant, a tiny, whimsical rebellion in a sea of manicured boxwoods. The recycling bin. I'd been on a final handover call with my old firm, a 2-hour marathon of untangling complex contracts. I'd simply forgotten. My first instinct was to draft a legal response so dense and aggressive it would make Marcus Thorne blush. But the strategist in me took over. This wasn't about a gnome or a trash can. This was a probe, an opening move in a campaign of attrition. Brenda was testing my defenses. To fight it head-on over such trivialities would make me seem volatile. To ignore it would be to cede territory. The correct play was tactical compliance and meticulous documentation. I paid the $125 fine online. I then wrote a polite, almost obsequious email to the HOA board, confirming payment and assuring them of my future vigilance. I moved the gnome to my back deck, a silent protest. I set a recurring alarm on my phone for 11:45 a.m. every Wednesday. Rescue bins from tyranny. For a few weeks, an uneasy peace settled. I unpacked, arranged my library, and tried to immerse myself in my new, quiet life. I met a few neighbors. On one side were the Hendersons, a young couple who seemed friendly but perpetually harried by their 2 toddlers. On the other was George, a widower in his 70s, who spent his days lovingly restoring an old wooden sailboat in his garage. Just learn to pick your battles, George advised me one afternoon, the scent of varnish and sawdust hanging in the air around him. He spoke in a low, conspiratorial tone. Brenda, she's dedicated. Thinks she's the last centurion holding the line against the barbarian hordes of mismatched lawn furniture. He polished a brass cleat, his gaze distant. The boat was my Sarah's dream. We were going to sail it on the Great Lakes when we retired. Now I just work on it. Gives me something to do. The conversation was a small crack in the neighborhood's facade of placid conformity, revealing the weary resignation beneath. My presence was clearly a disruption, and Brenda was the antibody rushing to neutralize the threat. The next HOA meeting was my first chance to see her in her element. She stood at a lectern in the clubhouse, flanked by her board, running the meeting with the iron-fisted efficiency of a corporate raider. Discussions about petunia color schemes were debated with the gravity of international treaties. When she opened the floor, I stood up. Alex Pierce, Lot 47. I said calmly, I had a procedural question regarding the ARC approval process for a minor landscaping addition. I was hoping to plant a Japanese maple. Brenda's eyes narrowed. The procedure is clearly outlined in the welcome packet. Mr. Pierce. Of course, I said smoothly. My question was about the 60-day review window. Given that we're heading into the optimal planting season, I was hoping there might be a way to expedite the review. Her smile was thin and sharp. The committee members are volunteers. Mr. Pierce. We do not expedite for personal convenience. It was classic bureaucratic stonewalling, a tactic I knew well. I'd used it myself to wear down opponents. I submitted my application the next day, a masterpiece of overkill complete with topographical diagrams and soil analysis reports. It was unimpeachable. They approved it in 2 weeks. I spent a Saturday planting the beautiful crimson tree, feeling for the first time like I was putting down roots. It was a symbol of my new life. 10 days later, I came home to find that symbol broken. Half the delicate branches were snapped, the main trunk scarred by repeated blows. It was deliberate, malicious, a message. I didn't need to guess the sender. That evening, as I stood by the wounded tree, the cold reality of my situation settled in. Brenda wasn't just a stickler for rules. She was a saboteur. I felt a familiar, unwelcome sensation, the cold, calculating rage that had fueled my career. I had wanted to leave that man behind in Chicago, but Brenda Van Zandt was dragging him, kicking and screaming, into the tranquil suburbs. That night, I created a new, encrypted file on my secure server. I labeled it Project Nightingale. The data collection phase had begun. This was no longer a dispute. It was an operation. And my first move was to turn my quiet little house into an intelligence-gathering fortress. The transition from bureaucratic harassment to physical intimidation was a chilling escalation. The attack on my Japanese maple was a piece of deniable violence designed to terrorize. My pro forma email to the HOA about the unfortunate vandalism was met with a condescending reply from Brenda about the tree's failure to thrive. She was mocking me, telling me she'd done it and that I was powerless. She was wrong. Powerlessness was not a state I tolerated. The part of my brain that once designed security systems for billion-dollar skyscrapers came roaring back to life. I spent a week running what appeared to be new internet cables, but were, in fact, armored conduits for a closed-circuit, enterprise-grade surveillance system. 4 high-resolution, night vision cameras with powerful optical zooms were secreted into the landscape, one disguised as a birdhouse, another inside a lighting fixture. They fed into a secure network video recorder in my basement, with a redundant, encrypted feed constantly uploading to a private cloud server. It was corporate-level warfare technology aimed at a suburban cul-de-sac. The next incident involved my mailbox. After the original's door was mysteriously bent, I'd replaced it with a heavy, reinforced steel model. 2 weeks later, it was savaged. I didn't bother emailing the HOA. I went to the footage. At 2:13 a.m., a figure in dark clothing emerged from Brenda's side yard, carrying a sledgehammer. The figure swung it twice against the mailbox. The reinforced steel only dented. The figure, frustrated, kicked it and scurried back. As their hood fell back for a split second, the camera in the faux birdhouse captured a clear image of the face. It was Howard Van Zandt, Brenda's meek, pale husband. He was her quiet enforcer. I saved the footage to 3 separate locations, labeling it HVZ Vandalism Watch 1. It was a card to be held, not played. Not yet. Frustrated by my lack of reaction, Brenda shifted her assault to the Court of Public Opinion, the official Heron's Landing Community Facebook group. First came the subtle posts about the importance of following rules. Then, they became more direct. Attention parents! There have been reports of a newer resident's vehicle driving at excessive speeds. Please be extra vigilant. It was a complete fabrication. My cameras logged my sedan's maximum speed at 18 mph in a 25 mm zone. But the poison worked. Neighbors who had been friendly now averted their gazes. The Hendersons next door offered tight, apologetic smiles before hurrying inside. I was being methodically isolated, painted as a problem resident. It was a classic smear campaign, designed to discredit the target before they could mount a defense. The coldness in my gut was a familiar one. This was what our rivals did before a hostile takeover bid, leaking false rumors to the financial press. The tactics were identical, only the scale was different. It was during this period that the real world intruded. A phone call from my niece, Chloe. "Uncle Alex, how's the gnome? Does he like his new house?" Her 7-year-old voice chirped. "He loves it, sweetie." I lied, looking at the ceramic figure sitting forlornly on my back deck. "He's admiring the lake view right now." A pang of guilt struck me. I was engaging in a covert war, sinking back into the person I had spent a fortune to escape, all while trying to pretend I was living a simple life. The disconnect was jarring. This wasn't just a game. Brenda's actions were infecting the very core of the peace I sought. The conflict escalated. Brenda began weaponizing municipal authorities. First, animal control arrived, responding to an anonymous complaint about my vicious and uncontrolled golden retriever. The officer took one look at Buddy, who was ecstatically licking her hand, and rolled her eyes. "Third anonymous call from this neighborhood this year." She sighed. All unfounded. Next came city code enforcement, investigating an unpermitted deck that was, in fact, part of the original, fully permitted construction. I was prepared, presenting them with digital copies of the blueprints and certificates. They left, apologizing. Through my window, I saw Brenda watching from her house, a flicker of movement behind her pristine curtains. Her frustration was palpable. The final official visit was from the fire department, responding to a report of an illegal bonfire. It was my new, standard issue, gas-powered fire pit. The firefighters were not amused. Each visit was a disruption, a public performance designed to brand me as a troublemaker. But with each false alarm, Brenda's credibility was eroding. She was crying wolf, and the wolves were getting annoyed. I meticulously documented each visit, requesting official reports and adding them to Project Nightingale. The final escalation, the one that pushed things past the point of no return, was far more personal. I was planning a small reunion. Marcus and a few other senior partners from my old firm were flying in for a weekend. It was meant to be a celebration of my new life. I was in my front yard when Brenda's golf cart glided to a stop. This time, she got out, a smug, triumphant smirk on her face. "Pierce," she said, her voice dripping venomous sweetness. "I've been doing a little reading. Ethelred Development, the Riverbend project in Chicago." A cold knot formed in my stomach. The Riverbend project had been the ugliest deal of my career. A massive urban renewal project that the media had painted as a corporate monster paving over people's homes. They had called me the architect of ruin. It was the final catalyst for my retirement. "It sounds like you're not a very popular man," Brenda continued, her eyes gleaming. "I happen to know a freelance journalist. It would be a terrible shame if your new neighbors found out who really moved in. I imagine they wouldn't take kindly to someone like you." This was it, the ultimate threat. Not to my property, but to my sanctuary. She was threatening to import the demons of my past into the heaven I was trying to build. A memory, unbidden, flashed through her mind. A poolside patio in Florida, Tiki torches, casting flickering shadows. The humid night air, thick with the scent of chlorine and gardenias. The other HOA wives turning their backs on her. Their whispers, like the hissing of snakes. Embezzler, one had mouthed. Her husband Howard, pale and useless, had just stared at his drink. She had never felt so small, so powerless, so utterly humiliated. She had sworn that night, with a vow so fierce it felt like a physical sickness in her gut, that she would never, ever be powerless again. She would be the one in charge. She would be the one respected. She would be the one feared. She blinked, the memory receding, leaving a residue of cold fury. She was in control here. She had found this man's weakness. "Is that a threat, Brenda?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "It's a promise," she hissed. "You don't belong here. I will do whatever it takes to prove it." She turned and walked away, radiant with victory. She thought she had found the perfect weapon. She had no idea that in threatening my past, she had just guaranteed her own future would become a matter of public record. The annual Heron's Landing. Summer luau was in 2 days. It would be the last party she ever hosted. The day of the Heron's Landing. Summer luau arrived on a perfect late summer breeze, carrying the scent of cut grass and sunscreen. The community beach was a stage set with tiki torches and inflatable palm trees, a picture of suburban harmony I was about to dismantle. My guests, Marcus Thorne, Eleanor Vance, and David Chen, had arrived the day before. They were not just my old colleagues. They were my war council. We spent the morning on my back deck, the complete Project Nightingale file spread between us. "It's airtight, Alex," Marcus said, his lawyerly eyes scanning a summary page. "Strategic harassment, vandalism, misuse of public resources, and the PI's report on her Florida finances establishes motive and precedent. It's a slam dunk." Eleanor, our logistics genius, tapped a satellite map of the development. "The confrontation has to be public, Alex. Her power is derived from public perception. You have to dismantle it in front of the very people she lords it over." "That's the plan," I said, my eyes drifting towards the lake. "And I know the perfect place to do it." Around 4 o'clock, we made our move. We carried my handcrafted cedar strip canoe down to the small private dock at the edge of my property. As we launched, I could feel the eyes of the luau attendees on us. We were the bait, and the shark was circling. Brenda, wearing a floral muumuu and holding a plastic tiki cup, saw us. Her face curdled. This was a public challenge to her authority on her most sacred day. She slammed her cup down, grabbed her clipboard, and marched toward my property line. The party chatter died. Everyone turned to watch the impending execution. She stopped at the edge of the sand where it met my lawn. "Pierce!" Her voice was a shriek that cut through the air. "Get back here this instant. The lake is for HOA members in good standing. Your guests are not members. They are not permitted on the water. This is a violation of Bylaw 7, Section C, regarding guest access to common areas." I let the canoe drift about 20 yards out. "I think you might be mistaken." "Brenda," I called back, my voice deliberately calm. "I am never mistaken about the bylaws," she bellowed, shaking the clipboard at me. "I will call the sheriff and have them cited for trespassing. I will not have our rules flouted so brazenly, especially not by you." The silence from the assembled neighbors was absolute. They stood, frozen, watching the drama unfold. Brenda was radiant in her power. I took a deep breath. Showtime. I guided the canoe back to my dock and walked slowly to the edge of my lawn, stopping 10 feet from her. Brenda, there are two fundamental flaws in your argument, I began, my voice quiet, but carrying with cold precision. The neighbors leaned in. How dare you? First, I said, holding up a finger, trespassing is a legal statute. You, as a private citizen, have no authority to have anyone removed. But that's a minor point. I let the words hang. Your second, and much, much bigger flaw, is your assumption of ownership, your authority. Brenda, it ends at the water's edge. A confused murmur rippled through the crowd. Brenda stared at me, her mouth agape. That's impossible. This lake is the crown jewel of Heron's Landing. No, I corrected her gently. It isn't. This entire lake, the dam that creates it, and a 50-foot riparian buffer of land surrounding its entire circumference, is my private property. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Brenda's face went from red to a shocking, pale white. The clipboard slipped from her numb fingers. The original developer, I explained, my voice now a lecture in real estate law, went bankrupt. In the liquidation, the assets were sold off piecemeal. The residential lots to one company, the clubhouse to the HOA. But Parcel 7B, the lake itself, was sold to a private investment LLC to settle a major mechanics lien filed by one of the primary contractors. That was 12 years ago. I paused, letting the information detonate. I know this because my company, Ethelred Development, acquired that contractor and its assets, including that LLC. I have personally owned this lake for over a decade. The desire to finally build a house on the property I'd owned for so long is the entire reason I moved here. Marcus stepped forward from my dock, holding a leather portfolio. Brenda Van Zant, he said, his voice resonating with legal authority. I am Marcus Thorne, legal counsel for Mr. Pierce and manager of Whisper Lake Holdings, LLC. This folio contains the deed, title history, and the official Onslow County survey of my client's property. Every rule you have enforced regarding this lake has been fraudulent. Brenda looked like she had been physically struck, but I wasn't finished. You see, when you started harassing me, I started investigating you, I said, my voice hardening. I know about Florida. David Chen stepped forward, holding a tablet. This is a recording from a concealed camera on Mr. Pierce's property, time-stamped 2 months ago at 2:13 a.m. He turned the tablet to the crowd. The video was crystal clear. Howard Van Zant, sledgehammer in hand, bludgeoning my mailbox. Shocked whispers erupted. Howard, by the grill, looked like he might faint. Furthermore, I continued, we have logged every one of your anonymous calls to municipal authorities, traced the slanderous Facebook posts to your home IP address, and have high-resolution footage of the vandalism to my tree. I took a step forward. The crowd parted instinctively. You threatened to destroy my peace. Brenda, you threatened my home. So I am going to return the favor. I gestured to the community entrance, where a sheriff's patrol car was just pulling in, its lights off. The sheriff isn't here for my guests. Brenda, he's here for you. The aftermath was not a quiet fade to black, but a swift, surgical dismantling of a petty empire. As the deputy approached, Marcus calmly laid out the case, presenting a USB drive with the compiled evidence. The vandalism footage was undeniable. Brenda, stripped of her public authority and exposed as a fraud, simply crumpled. There was no fight left, only the vacant, horrified stare of someone whose world had been demolished. She and Howard were quietly escorted away. The Heron's Landing. Summer luau ended in stunned silence, the tiki torches flickering over a battlefield. The legal consequences were severe. Brenda was charged with vandalism, criminal harassment, and filing false police reports. The board, spurred by Marcus's disclosures, launched a forensic audit which revealed years of embezzlement. Facing an avalanche of evidence, she pleaded guilty. She received probation, was forced to pay restitution to both me and the HOA, and was hit with a permanent restraining order. The Van Zants sold their house at a loss within a month and vanished. An emergency HOA meeting was called a week later. I attended, not as a conqueror, but as a neighbor. I formally offered to grant the HOA a written license for community access to the lake, contingent on the hiring of a professional management company and the complete overhaul of the bylaws. They agreed enthusiastically. The old draconian rulebook was ceremonially shredded. Today, as I sit on my back deck, the setting sun paints the surface of my lake in hues of orange and violet. The air smells of cool water and night-blooming jasmine. Buddy rests at my feet, occasionally twitching in a dream. A few neighborhood kids are paddling a canoe near the far shore, their laughter echoing in the quiet evening air, a sound that is no longer a violation, but the very definition of the peace I sought. I had to become the man I used to be one last time, so I could finally and truly become the man I wanted to be. The quiet was here all along, buried under layers of petty tyranny. All I had to do was excavate it.